Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Adams, the Health Ranger with NaturalNews.com. Today, we're joined by a really amazing guest, one of the most, one of the most profound and well-researched journalists in the world, writing today without giving in to the New World Order and all the corporate agendas and all that. This guy is a real journalist doing real research, writing about real issues that matter to us. He's someone that I look up to, that I met a couple of years ago. We both have received awards from the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. He's the author of numerous books, but the most recent is The $1 Trillion Conspiracy: How the New World Order, Man-Made Diseases, and Zombie Banks Are Destroying America. His name is Jim Marrs, and he joins us today by phone from Texas. Hey, Jim, how you doing today?
Howdy, Mike. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, it's cool to find out that you're in Texas too. I'm in Texas. We're both Texans now, although I think you have a lot more seniority than I do in that realm.
Well, and to be brutally honest, it's not really cool in Texas right now, is it? Actually, no, it's pretty hot.
A lot of heat going on, but let's talk about the heat in the financial markets to open up our discussion. Can you explain to the listeners right now, first set the stage, what is factually happening in the world, and then I want to ask you. And I'm talking about the stock market, the money supply, the Fed, and so on. Well, and then I want to get your analysis on why that's happening.
Okay. Well, first off, what's happening is, of course, just turmoil, chaos, and the why of it is because it's being manipulated. Right now, the markets are roiling because Standard & Poor has downgraded the U.S. credit rating from AAA to AA+. But what people don't understand is the largest stockholder in Standard & Poor's is J.P. Morgan. So they pull on both ends of the string and they manipulate the thing. That's why for years people have asked me, what stock would I suggest they invest in? I tell them, go to Las Vegas. The odds are better.
Right.
But, I do deal with the financial meltdown and what caused the crash and who's behind it and who has precipitated these, what has been known as liar's loans, in my new book, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy. But as you well know, Mike, because I think you're already into it, it's not strictly a financial book. It's about a lot of different things. But interestingly enough, they made me change the title to The $1 Trillion Conspiracy because my original title was Zombie Nation. And I use the term advisedly because, they call these banks whose liabilities outweigh their assets. They're broke, they're dead, but they've been propped up by taxpayer money and TARP funds, so they're still going through the motions of business, so they've been called zombie banks, okay? Well, let's look at the United States of America. We have more liability than we have assets. If every American sold every asset they have, and that's man, woman, and child, sold all their clothes, their TVs, their cars, their homes, it would total not much over $10 trillion. And yet today we collectively owe, depending on who you want to listen to, somewhere up around $14 trillion. So we owe more than we own.
and that doesn't even cover all the unfunded liabilities down the road.
Exactly. That's what they're more or less admitting to. If you talked about the unfunded liabilities, we're up into much higher numbers, and people don't even really understand what a trillion is. I mean, that's a number that's just so far beyond, human comprehension that it's not even funny. But let's say, let me put it this way, because now living in Texas how big Texas is, right?
Well, sort of, yeah. Well, I haven't walked it, But.
Well, and you probably couldn't in your lifetime, and particularly if you made circles. But if you go from the Louisiana-Texas border to El Paso, that's pretty much the same distance between El Paso and Los Angeles. That's how big Texas is. So
wow.
So to try to give you an idea of the number trillion, if you had a trillion, just 1 trillion square miles, that would encompass 3.7 million states the size of Texas.
Wow.
That's just an unimaginable number, isn't it? So,
yeah, it's incomprehensible to most folks.
Yeah,
but
and yet we owe trillions, and worse yet, our current financial situation, of course, is totally based on the Federal Reserve System, which is neither federal nor does it have any reserves. It is 12 banks that are owned by private banks, which are in turn owned by private citizens, many of whom are not even U.S. citizens. And they totally can, by controlling, expanding or contracting the interest and money supply, they totally control our economy. And yet, when since its inauguration in 1913, there has never been a comprehensive audit of the Federal Reserve System. We don't know what they're doing or how they're doing it. In fact, in 2009, when Bernanke, the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, was asked by Congress, what have you done with our money? He says, well, we're a private concern. That's proprietary information. We don't have to tell you that. But now we have found out. We have found out some, but thanks to Ron Paul and others that have been trying desperately to get some figures, and they've finally pried some information out of the Fed, and what we find is they have sent $14 trillion of our tax money overseas to prop up foreign businesses and foreign banks.
Right.
Come on.
It's a big eye opener for people out there. But the truth is, Jim, most people, most people haven't really been able to get into this. I mean, even though your book has been very successful, it's still just like my website, it's still only read by a small portion of the total population. I mean, the vast majority of the people out there have no clue and are actually even mentally incapable, it seems, of grasping what is really happening behind the scenes. Why is food becoming more expensive? Why are their dollars not stretching as far as they used to? They don't understand the erosion of the value of the money supply, how it's happening from the Fed and the Treasury.
Well, you can be the smartest person in the world, but if you don't know about something, you're ignorant about that, right? And so I think the problem comes back to the fact that the vast majority of people, and of course, obviously we're not talking about people who read my books or listen to your radio cast or go to your website. We're talking about the vast majority of other people who are base their entire worldview on what they see on TV.
Right.
And when you start talking about TV, then you start talking about the corporate control mass media, which is now under the control of only 5 corporations, all of which have interlocking boards of directors. So actually you have a handful of people who now control everything that we see and hear. And I'm not just talking about news. I'm talking about movies, music, TV, cable, satellite, billboards, magazines, book clubs, you name it. It's all owned by this handful of people, and they only tell you what they want you to hear. In fact, it's the old adage that the freedom of the press belongs to the guy that owns the press.
Of course, yeah. But the interesting side effect of all this is that, you can, if you're the old media, the controlled media, you can lie to people for a while, but sooner or later reality starts to become noticeable.
That's beginning to happen, isn't it? I just noticed today the Christian Science Monitor, which I've always held in reasonably high regard as a journalistic medium, they published an article by some so-called journalist who said Ron Paul has admitted that he's not in the race to win. That's simply not true. I've heard Ron Paul himself say, yes, I'm committed. I'm here. I'm here to win. And so what? They just lie about it? And then I saw this, and then when I went back to their website, they had altered the article and said portions of this article have been deleted because they could not be substantiated. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but it's already out there, right? And then we saw Fox News, who, when here a few months ago, when Ron Paul won the MSNBC straw vote, overwhelmingly got to huge applause from the audience. What did Fox News do? They ran a clip from 2008 where he also won the straw poll for MSNBC, but the audience was filled with Mitt Romney supporters, and there was a whole lot of booing going on, and that's what they played as if that was this year. Now that is, I mean, it makes me ashamed to call myself a journalist, because there is no journalism in this country. There's only corporate advertising delivery systems.
Well, I've talked with many journalists off the record, as I know you have too. Your books are extremely well researched and well cited, I should say too. But off the record, journalists will tell me, "Look, Mike, we try to cover the truth, but if we print something that's actually informing or empowering the people, the story gets canned by the people upstairs, or it gets distorted and rewritten and retitled in ways that make it sound like the opposite of what it is." For example, vitamin D and sunshine is associated with a lower risk of cancer. That's well known by people who are informed now. But many newspapers, I'm talking mainstream newspapers and magazines, they will publish stories with headlines that say vitamin D linked to cancer.
Yeah, right. Well, I'll tell you why that is. And this leads back to one of my big bugaboos, because one of the issues today that rightly causes so many people such concern are the rise in teen suicides and the school shootings that have taken place. Hell, Mike, when I was a kid growing up in Texas, we took guns to school, but nobody shot anybody. All right? And yet the media today, all they can talk about is guns. Well, if we take all the guns up, all that would stop. And, of course, it won't, because no way you're ever going to take all the guns up. All that's going to happen is the same thing that's happened in Australia and England, which is you take the honest people, turn in their guns, and that leaves an armed criminal class, which then wreaks havoc, right? Well, now, why are they talking about guns? But it's not the guns. It's the psychotropic drugs. It's the drugs that are warping these kids out and warping the borderline schizophrenics and psychotics out and causing these school shootings. And that's clearly demonstrable. But why won't the media tell you that? Because they count among their largest advertisers the giant pharmaceutical corporations, right?
Yep. And
that's the bottom line. They won't write about that because they don't want to risk losing their advertisers. And now we're back to this corporate control of the mass media. In fact, growing up, you never heard a drug ad on television. That was against the law. You couldn't do that.
Right.
And now you turn on television, and they're not trying to sell you a truck; they're selling you a drug. Right?
Yeah, well, the FDA knew, I think, in 1998 when that was legalized by the FDA to advertise on TV, they knew that would create the dynamic where the media was now financially beholden to the pharmaceutical industry.
Exactly.
And from there,
if you've read my book, The Rise of the Fourth Reich, you will understand. I'm sure you do, Mike, but your audience would understand that these handful of giant multinational pharmaceutical companies today that wield so much power all owe their heritage to the Nazi IG Farben chemical combine.
That's exactly right. I'm really glad you brought that up. That's another great book that people should check out, The Rise of the Fourth Reich, Secret Societies That Threaten to Take Over America. But what you mentioned there is absolutely true. IG Farben was broken up after World War II during the Nuremberg trials, I believe, and it became three different pharmaceutical companies, one of which was Bayer, and then the chairman of Bayer was convicted of Nazi war crimes and actually served a sentence for that.
Yeah, briefly, and then released. And you're talking about Hermann Schmitz, and at one time Hermann Schmitz owned more stock in Standard Oil than the Rockefellers did. which shows you at what level and at what power structure the Nazis had. It's an amazing story, and again, it's not being told to people.
Yeah, that's what's really cool about your books, is that you reveal these threads throughout human history, and also right up into the modern day society, threads that are not normally talked about in the media, but which are actually well documented and well proven, and you lay all that out. So your book is really your latest one here, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy. I'm reading that right now, and it's just an amazing journey into a look behind the curtain.
Yeah, exactly. And as George Santayana said, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And we see history repeating itself. In fact, the parallels between Nazi Germany and modern America, to me, just scream out. In early 1933, Germany was a democratic republic, the Weimar Republic. And the Germans were among the more educated and cultural people in the entire world. And then within the next month or two, their parliament, the Reichstag, caught fire and was gutted, which in that kinder, gentler time was as big a trauma to those Germans as 9/11 was to us. And then Hitler, who had just been chancellor, and which was kind of like vice president, steps up and says, well, give me the power, and I will tell you, this was a communist terrorist plot. Give me the power, I'll take care of everything. So he rammed through the Enabling Act, just like we rammed through the Patriot Act. And then they consolidated all the police agencies under the Gestapo, and now we consolidated all the police agencies under the Homeland Security, and then we started building detention centers, which are now still 800 of them or so scattered around the country. It's all happening again, and nobody knows, nobody pays attention, and nobody seems to care because they're all mesmerized by television.
So, but you're seeing these signs very clearly, and right here in the real world, signs that the U.S. is building a police state infrastructure. We were talking before this about something you noticed on the highways too. Can you explain that?
Oh yeah. That's well, everyone can see this from themselves, but nobody pays any attention. Just in the last 5 or 6, 8 years, you'll notice the big freeways going in and out of the cities, usually 4-lane divided highways, and they used to have a nice little grassy green strip as a median in between. Well, now, all of a sudden, I noticed they're coming along and they're putting in these concrete strips. And when I just saw the concrete being laid, I thought, well, that's nice. They're putting in a bicycle path or a pedestrian path for people to walk on. But no, then they came in and they embedded these steel posts, and now they have put steel cable, not just, a little piece of wire or rope or something, to show this is don't cross here. No, these are steel cables, and that miles and miles and miles of them on all these freeways leading in and out of the city. And what's that all about? Especially at a time when the cities and counties are so broke and they're having to jump through hoops trying to get more money, and they're trying to cut services, and yet they're spending millions of dollars putting in these solid metal posts and steel cables on the freeways coming in and out of the cities. What's that about? Well, I'll tell you. It's about so when they impose martial law and they bottle up the cities and they set up checkpoints to stop people from coming in or out of the city, and you see that up ahead, you can't turn around. You're going to be caught.
So, martial law there's another concept that you and I know is coming because we've seen all of this in progress and written about it, but the average person out there just can't really even conceive of martial law happening in America. They think that's what happens in other countries.
Right.
But not in America. But it's coming. How can you help people awaken to this reality so they can look around and get prepared?
Well, I'm doing all I can do, which is to put all the information down between two covers, and I've been very fortunate in that I've got a major publisher, HarperCollins, and William Morrow, and they have actually published my books, although the last one, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, I actually experienced overt censorship, and that's kind of bothering me. But at least the information is out there. But now you ask, how can you wake people up? And Mike, that's like, that's remember the old line about you can lead a horse to water, but you can't
Yeah.
make him drink? We can you're presenting the information, I'm presenting the information, but if they don't want to drink, you can't make them drink. So, but I think that it's incumbent upon everyone who is awake at this point and does understand what's coming up. It's very incumbent upon them to start trying to wake up their neighbors. Now, you don't want to do that. You don't want to be preachy, because nobody likes to get preached at, and you don't want to argue with people because nobody wants to be argued with. But you can start mentioning and bringing up the issues and trying to get people to think. For example, why don't you just ask all your friends and neighbors and relatives, hey, if we're supposed to believe that there's this evil international gang of terrorists trying to destroy our country and slip weapons of mass destruction into our cities, why have they not done one substantial thing to secure our borders? Get them to think about that. And then since it's all based on fear of terrorists, which all goes back to the attacks of 9/11, just ask them, hey, well, tell me this. How does 2 airplanes crashing bring down 3 buildings?
Oh, yeah.
One of them
World
didn't
Trade
get
Center
hit by an
7.
airplane at all. How did it come down?
I want to ask you about Building 7 here, but first, you reminded me of a question here about terrorism. Janet Napolitano has just put out a new video, Homeland Security video, another version of the if you see something, say something. But the last 2 or 3 videos, including this one, are all featuring white terrorists.
Right, exactly. I saw this one, and the guilty parties are a white cab driver and a well-dressed white woman. Whoa, wait a minute. So I guess everybody is now suspect. See, fear your neighbors. And I'll tell you something. A few years ago, I have a copy of a how to recognize a terrorist that was put out by the Texas Department of Public Safety. And I have a copy of that brochure. And in that brochure, it says such gems as this. Terrorists will travel with women and children to hide their identity. They will smile and try to be pleasant. They will be neatly dressed and act like they like the police. But God, give me a break here. What are they doing? It's like fear everybody. Guy sitting next in the theater, if he's dark hued, he's suspect. Now if he's light hued, he's suspect. The bottom line is fear mongering.
But that's who they've named. I don't know which. I think the federal agencies have specifically named that people who support Ron Paul might be terrorists, or people who question the Federal Reserve might be terrorists. What other examples are there?
Well, no, what they're saying there is anyone who now is trying to point out the truth of our situation in this country and the fact that these criminals, and I use the term advisedly because I'm talking about people who violate not only international law but also our own laws, they are now in control of the government. And now they are very fearful, because if the people were to wake up and realize, well, I'll put it in the words of George Herbert Walker Bush, who back in the 90s told Sarah McClendon, that old curmudgeon reporter for the White House, and she published it in her newsletter. He told her, he said, Sarah, if the American people ever find out what we've done to them, they're going to chase us down the street and hang us from the lamppost. And that's true. It's exactly true. If they knew the truth about 9/11 and the deaths of those 3,000 people, if they knew the truth about these unprovoked wars of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan, if they knew the truth, if they weren't so bedazzled, distracted, and blinded by the corporate mass media They would. They'd march on Washington, they'd lynch a bunch of people. And they're scared to death. So they are now demonizing the very people who are beginning to wake up and realize what's causing the problem in this country.
Yeah, a great example of that was the recent debt ceiling negotiations and that whole fiasco. And,
Yeah.
you know, the Tea Party members were saying, you know, we have to radically cut spending and get our budget under control. Now, they have been called terrorists for demanding that we balance our budget. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a balanced budget. Holy cow. What terroristic activity is that? Now, wait a minute. Okay, now, I realize a lot of people, myself included, do not understand all this complicated economics and, you know, assets, liabilities, gains, da-da. Okay, but it's just simple, folks. If you have $1,000 in the bank and you owe $10,000, you got a problem. And the solution to that problem, obviously, is not to go out and borrow more money. You need to start cutting back on your expenses and paying down your debt. And yet when you say that in terms of the U.S. debt, which is now unredeemable, there's no way we'll be able to pay it off because we're paying, it's taken everything that we can siphon out of our economy just to pay the interest on the national debt. So we'll never get out from under it unless we default.
So, well, let me ask you that. Where does this go? I mean, I really want to put you on the spot here and ask you for your best assessment. I mean, I know you don't have a crystal ball or anything, but in your best assessment, how does this conclude? Because we know it's not sustainable. What happens? What kind of timeline?
Oh, well, I don't know the timeline because that's the only place I've really been a little bit off. I mean, you can go all the way back to when I was just a reporter for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram back in the 60s and 70s, and I was trying to tell people then that Kennedy was killed as a result of a conspiracy. Criminals had gained control over the federal government. It was expanding beyond all, you know, redemption. And of course, I was just a conspiracy theorist. And yet, everything I ever said, I said, Vietnam's a disaster. It's going to end badly. I said, Nixon was a crook. And I was just a conspiracy theorist. But looking back in hindsight, everything I ever said was true. The only thing where I was off was just time frame. It took longer. Right. Things looked. I thought we'd be into George Orwell's 1984 in 1984. You know, but it's taken into the new millennium for us to really get heavy into this Orwellian society. But now, how's it all going to end? Well, I see we are on a converging pathways, okay? And things are speeding up, and we're all rushing pell-mell into the future, and we're going to hit this intersection. And from that point, we can go one of two ways. Either things are going to get so bad and people are going to get so fearful and so dumbed down and so apathetic and so distracted and befuddled that they're going to give up, and we're going to have a true Orwellian society, police state, where the police come and they'll be judge, jury, and executioner, and they're fast becoming that way right now. And we'll lose all sense of individual liberty, individual privacy, and we will definitely go into this 1984 type totalitarian society with the cities turned into giant concentration camps where you have to show your ID, you know, every block. You have to be scanned every time you do something. Or we can begin to wake up enough of the population to where we hit a tipping point and people begin to realize that's not the future they want. And then they start taking control at the local level. They take control over their local school boards, their local city councils, their local county government. And then they start throwing off the yoke of tyranny, just like the sheriff did in Montana, who publicly said that any federal officer who came into his county and tried to take actions that would violate the Constitution of the United States of America or the Constitution of Montana, he would have his deputies escort them out of the county. and this is what we need to do. But of course, we saw, the fledgling efforts are being made. I don't know if you ever were here in Texas, Mike, when the House passed a new law that was going to call for jail time and heavy fines for TSA agents who put their hands on your sexual genitalia,
sure.
right?
Yeah, we covered that story.
30 of the 31 senators said they would sign it, and Governor Rick Perry even indicated he would sign it, and yet the Justice Department came down and basically said, if you pass this law, we're not going to let any flights come in and out of Texas, and we'll just declare Texas a no-fly zone. And and they caved in. They caved in. Thanks to David Dewhurst and some of those jerks down there that are just nothing but New World Order pawns. And, if I'd been in charge down there, I would have said, well, that's fine. Go ahead and declare us a no-fly zone. And if you do that, then we're going to take all the IRS money that flows into Texas, and we're not going to send it to Washington. We'll just hold it here in Texas.
I mean, whatever happened, I mean, if any state was going to stand up to the feds, I would have thought it would be Texas.
I know, but see, you have to understand, Texas has been infiltrated since after World War II, when the Rockefellers came down here and started buying up large tracts of land, hoping to get a monopoly over uranium, because at that time, they saw nuclear power as the definite wave of the future, and they were going to get a lock on all the uranium, so they'd have a monopoly just like they've had over petroleum since the 1800s, okay? And then they brought in their carpetbagger buddies like the Bushes. That's one thing that's always hacked me off, is that everybody outside of Texas thinks that the Bushes are Texans. Well, they're no more Texans than I'm a New Yorker. They're Yankee carpetbaggers from Connecticut. And why did they leave Connecticut? Because the old man, Prescott Bush, was actually prosecuted in late 1942, the middle of World War II, for being nothing but a financial frontman for Hitler and the Nazis. And the people in Connecticut knew this, so they bailed out, came to Texas, and bought their way in to the oil business.
And now they have a whole airport named after them in Houston.
Oh, yeah, now we got airports and highways, and we got George W. Bush Freeway over in Dallas. It just makes me sick.
I love it. Every time I used to fly into Houston, the first thing I would get off the plane from Ecuador, first thing I would hear would be, "Welcome to the George W. Bush Intercontinental Airport. The terror threat level is now orange."
That's right. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
That's the first thing you hear.
But keep buying. Keep consuming.
It's incredible. I mean, welcome to 1984.
That's it.
Big time.
That's it. Absolutely. And if you've, I don't know how long it's been since you've read George Orwell's 1984, but you might recall that in that 1984 Orwellian society, everything that was bad, everything that happened was blamed on Goldman. Goldman did it. Goldman was behind everything, and yet, strangely, they never could quite catch up with Goldman, Goldman was Osama bin Laden.
Right.
But since
the fictional bad guy.
Yeah, but since bin Laden died, probably of natural causes, in late 2001, they could only drag that out for about 10 years, and then they had to finally say, well, we got him, but we threw his body in the ocean. We didn't want anybody to see it.
I got to ask you, though, Jim, how is it that people buy that story? I mean, it's so ridiculous on its face. Okay,
exactly.
Navy SEAL Team 6 goes in and finds bin Laden and, by the way, his secret stash of documents that provides this excuse for the next decade to come up with whatever intelligence they want to invent.
Exactly.
Oh, we found it in bin Laden's lair.
Right.
Yeah, it was in his safe. And they grab the guy, they say, and then they toss him in the ocean so that no one can look at his body, which is completely against all the religious. Yeah, and then
what we're told
a couple months later,
what we're told now is that he was unarmed. Okay, in fact, we were told right off officially that we were told they shot and killed his wife, and then it turned out, well, no, it wasn't his wife, it was some other woman, and she didn't die, she was just wounded, and and bin Laden wasn't armed. And then I've even heard accounts where he said he was begging for his life. Well, wait a minute. Why didn't they just take him, put him on the helicopter, fly him back to New York, put him on public trial, and show the world that the United States is a nation of law and justice? But no, 3 taps in the head and they throw his body in the drink. That's mafia.
Right.
That's what the mafia does, not the United States of America.
Well, of course. And this is what we see with the Rawson food raid in California, a mafia hit on a farming operation, an FDA mafia hit. That's what it was.
Well, see, when Rick Perry is calling for doing away with all these federal agencies, I think the FDA is one of them right at the top of the list, along with the BATF, which, as you well know, I think you covered this, the so-called sting operation. Yeah, where they were forcing gun dealers, and that is so patently obvious to me. They've been trying to demonize gun owners for decades, and so the BATF goes to the gun stores, forces them to sell guns to known Mexican drug thugs, and under the idea that we're going to track them back into Mexico, find out where they go. Well, wait a minute, we don't have any jurisdiction in Mexico. Once they cross the border, how do we know what they're going to do with them? We don't. So it was all obviously a scheme to then they could come out and say, oh, look, it's gun shows and gun dealers who are selling all the guns to the Mexican drug cartels. What a piece of work. And the thing is, though, see, when you control the mass media, you control the masses. In fact, Mike, when's the last time that you heard a national politician refer to the Republic? You don't hear them talking about the Republic.
You got to go way back for that.
Way back. They don't talk about the Republic anymore because we're not a republic anymore. We're the evil empire. Okay? And so, but what they do talk about is democracy. We got to save democracy. We got to take democracy to the Middle East. We got to bring democracy and defend democracy. Well, what is democracy? That's simply ruled by the majority. And what's the classic example of democracy in action? A lynch mob. And that's not what we were given, and that's not what we want. We were giving a democratic republic. Now, what's the difference? Well, in the democratic republic, you can't, if the majority say lynch him, you can't lynch him. You have to give the guy a fair trial. And there's checks and balances, and he gets the right to an attorney, and he gets the right to confront the evidence against him and the witnesses against him. He gets a fair trial. And then if he's found guilty, maybe even gets an appeal, and he's still found guilty, then you can lynch him.
Right.
That's what we're supposed to have. But no, it's and so why do they want to push this lynch mob majority rule democratic idea? Because they own the mass media, which means they control the masses.
Well, of course, and then people don't realize at all how easily they are controlled, how much they're influenced. And I'm talking about very intelligent people.
That's right.
I know doctors who are, their cerebral intelligence is very high, but they have zero awareness of even fluoride and aspartame, of dangers of pharmaceuticals, vaccines, or any of these political issues. They don't know what the Federal Reserve is. Like you said at the beginning, they're ignorant. Yeah, they may be smart, but they're ignorant. But what I don't get is how people can be so easily hoodwinked on things that you and I look at and say, well, that's obvious. Like World Trade Center Building 7. Yeah. It's obvious it was demolition that brought the building down.
Well, I don't know.
To others,
I don't know about you, Mike, but I credit my sanity with the fact that for the last 30-plus years, I've lived out here with a deep water well, and I have not been drinking fluoridated water.
There you go.
But yeah, you're right. And the thing is, I see very intelligent people, very awake people, very aware people today who are very concerned about the direction that our nation is taking. And yet when you bring up Ron Paul, they go, oh, well, he can't win. He's a niche candidate, and he'll never win. And I just want to shake them and say, why do you believe that? Because I know why they believe that. They believe that because the media has pounded that into their head.
Yeah.
And of course,
There's
once you think that, and then you say, well, go to the voting booth, you say, well, I don't want to vote for that guy because I've already been told he's not going to win. I don't want to vote for a loser. And of course, nobody votes for him, and then nothing gets done. What if everybody said, screw the media, I'm going to vote for who I want to vote for, and all these people who've cheered and sent dollars to Ron Paul actually voted for him, but then now we hit another problem, and that is the computer voting fraud.
There you go, yeah.
In Iowa, the missing 200 votes, if those votes had counted and were for Ron Paul, he would have won.
Of course.
But all of a sudden, they disappeared out of the computer,
There's so much corruption at every level that it's almost, I don't participate in elections at all. I don't even bother to vote because, but if Ron Paul's on the ballot, I'll vote for Ron Paul.
Well, I've already voted for Ron Paul for president.
Have you really?
Yeah, 1988. He was running as the Libertarian, and I voted for him.
There you go.
Didn't do any good then. I guess it's not going to do any good now because people will not listen. All they listen to is the TV.
That's the thing. There's this great divide now between those who watch TV a lot and those who don't watch it at all. Now, I don't watch TV at all. I don't even have cable service. The only time I even see a television show is when there's a clip on YouTube and, it's something important. But when I'm traveling and I'm in a hotel, I turn on the TV and I can't believe it. I can't believe what passes for television.
I know. In the 50s, they wrote about TV as the vast wasteland. Man, they ought to see it now.
It's incredible.
It's truly a wasteland now. And it really is. And to think that people are sitting there watching that hour after hour after hour. And, when it comes to the top of the hour, it's not, well, we've seen that show. That was interesting. Let's turn it off. It's what's on now. And they just go click to something else. And they're pretty soon. And, there's been scientific studies done to show that, a lot of TV watching actually begins to rewire your brain.
Yes, I believe it does.
Yeah, I'm sure you do too. You think that, right?
And I absolutely do. I think the combination of television, of fluoride in the water, of the mind-altering pharmaceuticals, the psychotropic drugs, and just sources of propaganda, newspapers and magazines. I think this all has a combined effect to just really mold people's minds into just being sponges for disinformation.
Zombies,
you got it.
That's true. It's absolutely amazing. And then when you try to tell them you're a zombie, they go, "Oh no, I'm taking a pill for that."
Hey, there's a zombie vaccine. Everybody line up.
That's right. And see, that was another thing. I guess you've noticed that. In fact, I can't remember now if I saw this on your website or not, but you remember when the Centers for Disease Control actually used the zombie metaphor, zombie apocalypse, in one of their big articles about how to prepare for an emergency.
We did. We covered that story. And, of course, months earlier, I put out the song called Vaccine Zombie.
Yeah. And, of course, which I tried to name my book Zombie Nation, and they made me change it.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Let's go over some of your books here as we wrap this up. By the way, you've got, of course, the $1 Trillion Conspiracy. That's the latest one, and I really want to encourage people.
By the way, in the middle of right on the date of the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, September the 11th, 2011, I've got a new, expanded, and updated book on 9/11 called The Terror Conspiracy Revisited, and I would strongly urge everyone to get that because it not only gives you the basic factual information about 9/11, but it puts it into a context so you can clearly understand what happened, who did it, and why.
There you go. All right, folks, if you want to have your mind expanded, if you dare, to learn what really happened, check out that book, The Terror Conspiracy Revisited. Also, you've got The Rise of the Fourth Reich, the Secret Society's book. That came out, what, in 2009 or 8?
8, I believe.
8. There we go. And The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, by the way, is also available on audiobook format. I've been listening to it as an audiobook while I do my farm work.
Yeah, and
Makes for some
it just
fascinating
recently
working.
came out as a soft cover edition, a less expensive, so you don't have to pay that hardcover price. And by the way, in the soft cover edition, there's like a 20-page preface updating things and bringing things up to speed. And by the way, one of the things you'll read in the new preface in the updated softcover edition of the $1 Trillion Conspiracy is how the federal government in 2003 got a patent on medicinal marijuana. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, hey, let's keep it criminalized until we can get a lock on it. And then, these states are starting to decriminalize and allow medical marijuana so quick. Let's get a patent on it so that we can profit from that.
Of course, that's what it's always been about.
Yeah.
Jim, do you ever write articles? I mean, we would love to publish your articles if you ever have some that you'd like to put out there.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've got a brand new website coming up. It should be up maybe by next week. That's how close it is. We're still working out the final bugs. And I am going to try to start getting a little more active. Right now, what I do is just pass along articles, and some of your articles, come to think of it. And when I see something that I think people need to know about, and I just, put a link or say, here, read this. But maybe I'll just start writing some stuff. But mostly, see, I've been putting my information in my books. But I'm going to start trying to maybe take some different tacks. I think doing short YouTube clips would be a good way to reach people, because people seem to pay attention to a short video more than they'll read something.
Yeah, they really do. YouTube clips are a great way to get some fans, some readers, subscribers. Yeah, I mean, we use YouTube. In fact, we put out a documentary, a short one, only about 8 minutes, I think, about the faked blueberries in groceries and cereals and foods. Yeah. And that video, believe it or not, to date has had 1.2 million views.
Whoa. Now, see, that's how you rich people. I'm not sure there's 1 million people still reading books in this country.
I know what you mean, yeah. I'm starting to wonder that myself, yeah.
But that's it. But the thing is, everyone who's listening to this, listen, you're not a bystander. You have a role in all this too. You're either going to be a victim or as the hippies used to say, you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And if you want to be part of the solution, then do whatever you can do, okay? We all can't write books and we all can't be health rangers, but we can talk to our friends and relatives. We can hold book club meetings in our home. We can hold neighborhood group meetings. We can talk up current events in church. Stand up, make yourself counted, and start trying to wake up your neighbors before it all falls down.
There you go. Well said, Jim. And do you want to give out the web address of your website?
Oh, it's jimmars.com, JIMMARRS.com. But again, you can go look at the old website, but just hang on there, because the new glorious website will be up hopefully maybe by next week.
All right. Well, it's going to be a few days before we get this interview posted anyway.
Maybe it'll be up by then. Now.
Check out Jim Mars. That's 2 M's and 2 R's. Okay, jimmars.com is the website. Jim, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us today.
Well, it's my pleasure, Mike. And as I said, I guess we could form a mutual admiration society, because I have really looked to you as a straight-on, truth-telling. Do you call yourself a journalist, or you just...
sometimes I do, but I'm more of an entertainer.
No, I think you're an activist. You're an activist.
I'm an activist.
Yeah, you're someone who's active and taking an active part. I call myself a journalist because I actually have a degree in journalism and worked in journalism for years, but I didn't leave journalism, okay? Journalism left me.
Absolutely, it did. Yeah, I remember when journalism used to be a profession that was, we're going to tell the truth, we're going to uncover the lies of government, we're going to hit this hard. Right. And where did that go?
Well, it got bought up. It got bought up. But, So people who want to know what's going on, go to jimmars.com, read my books, and listen to Mike Adams, the Health Ranger.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, together we certainly cover a lot of ground. And again, folks, I really want to encourage you to check out Jim's latest book, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, and other books. Just search for Jim Mars on Amazon.com or other book sites. You'll find a lot of good work out there. And again, Jim's work is extremely well researched and cited. He does not spout nonsense. It is all extremely well documented. By the time you finish his books, you will have a whole new education on things that maybe you're not supposed to know.
That's right. But always remember, what you don't know can hurt you.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, get ready for the wave of zombies headed your way.
That's it.
Zombie Nation is nearly upon us. Well, thank you, Jim. Have a great day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon about other topics.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure to be with you.